there's so many characters that I identify with because, every time you write a character, you put a piece of your soul into them. And even though if it's a villain or if it's a goody two-shoes or completely ditzy bimbo, then a bit of you is still in there because everything is semi-autobiographic that we write.
Behind every creative person or small business is a great story waiting to be told.
And we are here to tell them.
I'm Shane, aspiring author and man behind Idyllic Endeavour.
I'm Hannah, semi-abstract artist and woman behind Sarah Studio. And this is the
I-Endeavour Podcast.
Welcome back to the I-Endeavour Podcast. We're here this evening with Sky Sommers. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. So why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself and what it is you do?
I'm an author of fantasy and mostly fairy tales, but that's kind of like a hobby. My main job is something else.
Was writing always something that you wanted to do, or how did it come around?
I was always under the impression that people did diaries and filled out diaries and wrote diaries ever since they were kids, and that's what I did. And later I realized that it's not that common. So since I remember myself, probably since like age 10 or 12, I started writing poems, I started writing short stories and keeping a diary. And then I got to short stories in my 20 plus years. And then when I was working in London, I started working on a short story and then realized on page 80 that it wasn't so short anymore. So I moved into novels.
Well, sometimes it's really hard to rein it in if you're trying to write a short story. So, yeah.
And why would you? Because, if it's a novel and you have something to say and you have a story arc that goes beyond a few pages, then I just wanted to explore that. So that's how my novel length thing started.
Yeah, because I'd say, I've myself I've tried to start some short stories before, and they sometimes just get legs, and you just, as you said, you just need to go with it and just keep going. There's no point just cutting it short for the sake of it. You may as well explore every avenue. So true.
And sometimes when I'm writing some episodes in a book, some backstory for some character or other, then I realize that either there is a whole book there, or this will remain probably a short story which I will publish separately. Or hand out to my street team, to the people who write reviews for me as a thank you, for instance. So.
That's a nice idea. Giving a little reward to the people that to do that kind of stuff for you is nice. We actually were speaking to somebody else as well, and they kind of did something similar, but they kind of wrote something specific just for, say, like their subscribers as like a little extra, like, thank you for following me and stuff, which again I thought was a really nice idea. To keep people kind of happy and continue following you for the reason they're following you, I suppose.
Yeah, but the way that it happens is the way that it should happen is organically, because for instance, I always, before I started my newsletters and the emails started going out, I thought like, oh my God, what do I have to say to these people? I don't have anything personal to say. And also giving out the thank yous to the subscribers, then it's like, oh my God, when will I have time to write these? But for instance, with my last book, then my beta readers suggested that for the book to have a more clear vision, then I needed to cut some things. And then I cut 2 stories. But then you have the 2 stories that are still there. So that's how you organically get the freebies that you can disseminate once you polish them up a bit.
Yeah, that's very true as well. I suppose I haven't got anywhere near that road of having other people go through my stuff or anything like that. So I haven't experienced the organic nature of cutting them down and stuff yet. But that's very true. There's no point forcing something just to kind of get it out there. So did you go to college or anything to start writing, or did you just self-taught?
The only 2 things that I had in terms of education for the writing bit was a creative writing class when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
We I'm from Tallinn, Estonia, so I went to an English bias school, and we had teachers from US, from Australia, from England, and then one of them was Australian, and then an American guy took over the creative writing class. So that was just a fun bit to experiment. In terms of college, no, but I took a creative writing class later, which was I think she's a journalist for The Guardian, but she's also, reads voraciously, and she picks up on quite a lot of things that people can do better. And she did a masterclass that I went to London to attend, and that was also hugely useful. So those are the only two formal bits, and the rest comes from reading and writing and getting better and reading lots, like extensively. I read a lot of other people's books in different stages, when they're just writing them or when they're pre-publication, and that gives me a lot of ideas. But don't get me wrong, I don't steal them. It's just a way that they write, all of the senses that they prefer using, and then that helps me develop as well.
I think actually it was one of the quotes you put on. I got some nice notebooks from Hannah for Christmas for me to kind of put ideas and stuff in, and they have quotes on the front from authors. I think it's a Stephen King quote where he says, if you want to start writing, basically the first thing you need to do is make sure you read, and read a lot. So definitely reading is a big part of it.
Yeah, and that's also, it is hugely useful, and I totally agree with it, because as much as I write, then I read almost well, I publish less books than I read, of course, but it's, if I have to be honest, that it's about 1 or 2 books per week that I read.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I wish I had that time. Well, not that you have time necessarily, but like
I just read quite quickly.
Yeah.
And even the authors that we help each other out. They read my stuff and I read theirs, because we both are in the same genre, and we love each other's work. We follow each other anyway. So one of them said that I read as fast as her, and she has probably like 20 books on her TBR list, and she could read them in a month and go through and comment and say that you should probably consider doing this but not that. So it's not speed reading, because you just immerse yourself into the world of the book, like completely, and I get movies running in my head. But yes, I read quite
Yeah, I get that, because I love books, and when I'm in a book, I'm in a book. Like, I can't put it down, awake at 4 o'clock in the morning going, God, I'm going to be up soon with the baby and I need to put this down, but it's really good.
Yeah, I do. When I really get into a book, I definitely get into it. My problem is trying to start and getting into one. So I start reading them, and quite often they end up getting put to the side, and something else kind of comes along for me to do, and then it takes me a while to go back to them, and so I'm terrible for it. I would listen to more audiobooks than I would read. Yeah,
you dip in and out of a lot of books as well, whereas I'm like in one, and I have to read it and finish it, and then I go on to the next one, whereas you kind of dip.
Yeah, for me, I think it's really important.
The hallmark of a good book is that you can't put it down, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then for you, it just means that probably reading isn't the main bit, how you take in information. That audio, that's why it works better for you, because you're probably more information oriented that way.
Yeah, I think for me, like, the first couple of chapters of a book really have to grab my attention. And if they're too kind of, I don't know, too much world building, or just not enough kind of stuff to get me really interested, I tend to just give up with them. I don't give them a chance, really. I suppose that's the problem. But I just give up if I don't get hooked into it pretty quickly. And it's tough, like trying to write something. Like, I hope that when I publish mine, that people are hooked fairly quickly, but it might be the opposite. I might be the one who's writing boring things and people don't get hooked. But until
everyone likes different things, don't they? That's the thing.
Yeah, because for instance, Shane, you prefer to start with action because that gets you into the midst of things. But I just had a talk with one of other authors in a book club. We do that as well. We read books and we chat about them, authors. And she said that if there isn't a description early on in the book, then she gets her own image. And then when this description comes in the middle of the book or quite late, and for her late is second or third chapter, and if the image in her mind is what contradicts what the description is, she's like, no, I have already an image in my mind. You can take a hike, basically. This is too late to do things. So yes, different people prefer different things. World building for some, for others, the midst of it all, the action scene. Give me an action and I'm there.
Yeah, I think that's
like
definitely.
You. I like that.
Yeah, get me hooked with some action, and then I'm quite happy to listen to because world building was great as well, but I just find it's a bit slow at start. Then I find it difficult to get into. But yeah, just ease me in with some action, and that's it. I'll read it, no problem.
Sum up.
If you had to sum up what you do in 5 words, what would that be?
Oh yeah, that was a tough one. I actually had to think about it for quite a long time, because it would be easy to say that I create worlds, because I do, but it doesn't somehow sum it up. So I thought to my first retelling, which was Thumbelina, the Bride Experiment, and I thought how that all got started. And I thought that I can't say it in 5 words, I can say it in 4. I look for loops. Okay. So that's what I do. For instance, with fairy tales, I look for loops. I read the traditional stories and I look for, oh, hang on, but this could have gone completely differently. And the motivation for this could have been completely something else. And so you look for the gaps, you look for the loops, you look for the tiny little things that don't add up, because the allegory of the fairy tale world it's very simplistic. But for you to do a retelling, then you have to flip everything on its head. But that comes later, after you figured out what it is that annoyed you, what irked you. So
no, that's good. The authors that we've spoken to on this have definitely been able to articulate it much better. We were put on the spot as well, and we were useless. So you've done great. So
thanks.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of me.
So what would you say then is your earliest memory of writing?
The earliest memory of writing or wanting to write is different. If you mean the earliest memory that I actually am proud of, then it would be the submission of a poem about an imaginary funeral to a school journal.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
We were tasked with submitting something we had created ourselves for a publication which was going to be handed out to those who were graduating. And there were all sorts of different stories. The only rule was that you had to, you couldn't recycle something that you had written in the creative writing class. So you had to write something which was brand new. And there was nobody who was proofing it. So you had to proof it, you had to do everything. And I just sat there and thought, like, I really want to do this. And I was in a pretty dark mood, because the poem is slightly ironic, looking back at the life that you've had with the imaginary partner that has now left the building, so to say. And then basically confessing to him all your sins, that none of the kids are his, and horror stories like that. So I just made fun. It was a sarcastic poem, and I loved it. I think I shocked my English and creative writing teacher with it, but never you mind.
I know, shock
Sounds
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, shock can be a good thing. Definitely can be a good thing too.
Sounds like the plot of a movie.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what was your biggest inspiration to start writing? Was there a person or an event, or what kicked it off?
When I think about how I got into writing full-length books, then it wasn't an event per se. I think it was the circumstances that I found myself in. I was working a very interesting job in London, but it didn't have much creativity. It didn't have much room for it. Very left hemisphere dominant, crunching numbers, coming up with IT solutions, all that. And my creativity rebelled. So in my free time, I just started writing. And as it happens, I also had very interesting dreams. So I started copying off from the dreams. So that's how I started writing novels, I guess.
Dreams just seem to be a common factor. That's why a lot of people have the old notebook near the bed, because, get it down as soon as you wake.
Well,
so
dreams are like your own mind telling stories, aren't
your
they?
subconscious working away.
Yeah, I have synopsized quite a few of them, written down of the whole plot and everything, and some of them are still sitting in my drawer. And the first one that I started writing, it's not published, but I plan to do it later this year. But the second one that I started writing, that's the one that I published, the first book in 2012. So,
wow, there you go. From dream to paper.
Yes, from dream to paper.
So tell us then a little bit about your most recent book you published.
My most recent book, it's the second one in the series, but you can read it as a standalone as well. It's a retelling of Red Riding Hood, where Red is a boy, a 5-year-old boy. And it's a retelling in the sense of not the classical grim horror story, but more of a rekindled romance between the mother and father of the boy, one of whom has been turned into a wolf, and the other being the huntsman who can't obviously kill the wolf. So,
okay.
So there's that, and there's an additional cast of characters, because in the second book you get a bit of backstory to the Belle and the Beast as well. And it follows on also what happens to Cinderella after she lands her prince, because it's the second book. The first one is the Cinderella one. That's the latest, and it came out, I think it was 21st of March.
Okay, so not long ago at all.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
I think
that sounds
you'd like
right
to...
up my street.
Yeah, definitely. I think
Yeah, fairy tale retellings are your cup of tea?
Oh yeah, fairy tales are my cup of tea for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was saying to someone else, who was it there? Was it Kate?
Maybe, yeah.
I think it was Kate Callahan. I was saying to that I, in the last couple of years, got the Hans Christian Andersen old, cloth bound, his old fairy tales, and I couldn't remember them being as dark as they were.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, not quite as fairy tale-ish as I remembered them being when I was younger.
Well, he was rather depressed when he actually wrote those, and a lot of heartbreak happening in his life, and the allegory of those situations were put into story format. So yeah, that's why they're dark.
Yeah, I definitely never remember them being like that, and I read a few and I was like, okay, I don't think we can read them to our son for a while.
Maybe never.
It's dark as grim, because those are grim.
Yeah, they're also, that's very true. So, what character then would you say from your books do you most identify with, and why?
That's a very good question. There's so many characters that I identify with, because every time you write a character, you put a piece of your soul into them, and even though if it's a villain or if it's a goody two shoes or completely ditzy bimbo, then a bit of you is still in there, because everything is semi-autobiographic that we write. But if I had to pick a character, it would probably be the Goddess of Fate. In my first published book, it is about goddesses running amok in the present day world, trying to get their powers back, and she's one of the baddies, actually. So what does that tell you about me?
That's very interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah, I definitely, it's a common theme that we've heard as well about authors. Very hard to pick one character, and that they tend to spread their personality over multiple characters in their books.
Yeah, and each character is a piece of them.
Yeah. Whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah.
But it's almost like acting, because even with actors, they have to imagine themselves in the skin of the person that they're trying to portray. With writing different characters, unless you have a very good carbon copy, going around that you can just steal from, basically, you write what you see, then you have to channel that, whether it's an angry elf or whether it's a goody two-shoes 14-year-old, or you have to put yourself into the frame of that person. It's the same as acting. For me, it is.
Yeah.
So do you always have a clear vision for your next book, or does it just happen?
I started off with just muddling through, as in I did not have a clear vision. I just sat at my computer and whatever flowed out. But now I do things slightly differently. So I have an idea, and I don't write a synopsis, but I just start with the scenes. And then I plot it out in terms of, the storyline between these people, the storyline between those people. And then I print out both storylines and then, mesh them together so that the sequence is right. And then somewhere in the middle, I figure out what the ending is going to be. And somewhere in the middle, I figure out whether there are any interactions that need to happen, whether there are any spin-offs or something like that. So it is plancing. I plan things, but then I muddle through still.
Yeah, again, there's definitely so many different approaches, and everybody's is so individual, and that's really interesting to hear, how different people do different things. It's really cool.
That I could never do was just sit down and every single day write a chapter that just that is crystal clear and where the thing is going. I would never be able to do that. I think I haven't tried, but it just puts me in awe of the people who can.
Yeah, I said it on a previous podcast. I'll write for a while and then I'll put it down, and it could be weeks before I go back to it, because to get the kind of flow clear in my head, it doesn't necessarily happen in a day, in 2 days. It can take a while for me to jump back in and continue where I was and have a better idea of where I want it to go. So I definitely can't sit and just write a chapter and it's done and then move on. It's very difficult.
Yeah, but one of the things that the course the master course by the Guardian journalist, what that taught me was that even if you have 30 minutes a day, you write. Even if you have 5 minutes, even if you're walking down somewhere, not down the street, because let's be safe, but if you're walking down in a park and then you get an insane dialogue that just needs to be written down, otherwise you will forget. You just use your phone, you just use shorthand, you write wherever and for how long you can. And that was one of the eye openers that was useful. Another one, I don't know what changed. Probably I just challenged myself, but I used to be on a loop of, one book, it takes me about 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years to write, because that's how it used to be. But with this trilogy that I'm writing now, I don't know why, don't ask, but I decided that I'm going to do the rapid release. I think that's what they call it on Amazon. So a book comes out every 90 days. So the trilogy is basically written in 3 times 90 days. And so far, 2 books are out. The third one is in the making. And it looks like, I might be able to do that. So you can write faster. You can get into the flow faster. Dan, you need to have the family support you with that, because otherwise you're in the dumps.
Yeah. No, definitely. And you touched upon as well that kind of fairy tale retellings and fantasy is kind of the genre that you mainly write in. Is there another genre that you'd like to give a try at some point?
Yes. The book that I wrote first, which is still sitting in my drawer, almost finished. I just need to tweak some emotional bits in there. That is speculative fiction, so not sci-fi, but a possible future world with techie bits in it, but not quite a fantasy or a fairy tale. So I'm expanding into that. And also another book, again, something I dreamt, is about ancient Egypt, 2900 BC. So it's going to be historical fiction. Okay. And I don't know, I need to learn so many things, hieratic, and a lot about how people spoke that, during that time, etc., etc. So I need to do a lot of research before I write that one. I'll probably get around to it in about 10 years. I hope.
You have a goal anyway, at least.
I have a vision. I know how it needs to look like. I just need to get there and learn a few things along the way. Yay!
That's always nice. Yeah, it's always nice to learn more and new things, definitely.
What would you do?
If you weren't doing what you're doing, what would you be doing?
Now, if that is a question of if I wasn't writing, what would I be doing?
Yeah.
Then, no, not knitting, seriously. Probably reading and reviewing. I would still be reading. I would never, ever in my life give that up. And I think that somehow that still would lead me to try and write, even if I didn't initially believe in myself that, I could do this. Because everything comes from trying, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I read an interview, it was a couple of years ago now, I think. I don't know if you know her, Dawn French. She's a comedian. She's English, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she said in the interview that she loves books, but she has now got to the stage in her life where she's realised that she'll never be able to read all the books that she wants to read because she's of a certain age. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to start reading more, and more, because I read the same books over and if I love a book, I will read it over and over and over, and go to another one, but then come back to the one before and read it again. And I started thinking oh my god, I need to read more. I need to stop reading the ones that I love over and over and read loads more, because that is the most depressing thought.
It is depressing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the limits that we set ourselves, because I've been having these conversations with quite a lot of people lately of, it depends of whether you believe that the average age is, 70, and, you're going to keel over in about 20 years, and then no, I plan to live until I'm 120, because there's, 3D bits that are grown and things that are replaced in your body. And as long as I keep my mind sane, then I'm there. And that gives me a whole different time perspective. And since you spoke about the books that you're never going to be able to read, let me show where we're filming this. This is behind these doors. It's my library.
I can kind of see it.
I'm actually a de facto belle. These are all books. Wow. And when my dad built the library and together with my husband, and they were putting in the shelves, and they were asking, are you quite sure that you need that many shelves? And the shelves across 2 walls. And I'm like, have you seen my books? Have you seen how many I have? And then somebody came in, one of the either guests or one of the kids, and then they were like, have you read all of these books? And I'm like, no, there's a shelf of the TBR which I haven't read, but most of them, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's the dream, isn't it? To be
Yeah.
able to get a house where we can have a library in. That would be...
A big, nice library, yeah. You've always wanted one of those little ladders that you have to
Yes,
climb.
I've always wanted one of those ladders.
Yes, I'd love to live in a library, seriously.
There's an amazing library in Dublin in Trinity College, and I've actually never been.
Oh, you should
So
go.
we have to go at some point when lockdown's over.
Yeah.
Dream to-do list, yay!
So just going to go back to the question I asked about the fantasy. What is it about that genre that really draws you in?
That is a very good question. I think what I love about fantasy the most is that you can shape the world as much as you like, whether it is creating a whole new world and a language like Tolkien did, or you can populate it as sparsely as you do, which is what I do. I don't put a lot of imagery. I just put bits and bobs and let the reader imagine the rest. But that's what fantasy allows you to do. You can play around with however much you like and however little you like, and it can be as realistic as present day. You can mix, you can turn things up on their heads. You can do anything, because fantasy allows you that creativity. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, that creative freedom and avenue of escapism is definitely something that is very appealing about fantasy writing.
So what advice would you give to people that want to start writing?
Well, first of all, read lots, and read not just in the genre that you like, but also very different books. Go by recommendations of people you trust, because the more you read and the more different you read, then you figure out what is yours and what isn't, and then just start experimenting.
Yeah, I think as well, like, just don't be fearful of writing. Just do, even if it's just for you to start with, just put your thoughts down on paper and get someone close to you to read them. Like, you're unfortunately stuck reading mine. So, yeah, just go with it, and just don't be too scared to put it out there.
Yes, and the person that you find that you allow to read your stuff, they should be the person you trust, and also somebody who supports you and isn't judgmental. Because, for instance, I know some people who have tried to start writing and then immediately went and found an editor, and found a professional editor who doesn't like the genre that they write in, and who critique the hell out of it in a way that the person didn't want to write after that for 6 months.
Yeah,
So
that's not beneficial to anyone.
it's not very encouraging. So the people that are in your corner are the ones that you should trust, and they should also love the genre.
No, definitely.
The most important bit is to start writing. Just, sit down and put things on paper. Even if it seems ridiculous to you, just do it.
Yeah, well, all those authors who come up with the Harry Potters and the Hobbits and the Lord of the Rings, I'm sure when they sat down and they first started writing, it probably seemed weird and crazy, the things they were going to write about, and look where we are now. So
The first draft is always shit. Seriously. Anybody's first draft is always shit, and you need to factor that in. And it's okay if somebody reads your stuff and says, "Oh, this sounds so much like Harry Potter or Coelho or somebody else that it's okay if the first tries that you do imitate somebody, because that's how you find your feet. That's how you find your style."
Yeah, as long as I suppose it's not exactly the same.
Copyright.
Yeah, don't want any copyright issues. But yeah, no, I would agree. And I think we kind of touched upon it before in another episode, that an original idea is pretty much impossible to come up with these days. It's very difficult. It's how you tell a story. It may be a story that has been told 100 times before, but it's your way of telling it that matters. So don't be disheartened if you think you don't have an idea, because it's your way of talking and telling that will make people want to read.
True, and also the quirks that you have. For instance, I built a lot of humor and sarcastic humor into my books, and I think it's the feel that people like.
Yeah, it's a bit of your personality that they're reading, so
it jumps off the page, and that's what makes them pick up the book and read them and follow authors and read whatever they write.
Yeah, because you do get to a point. I know it was like Stephen King is one of my favorite authors, and regardless what comes out, I always am there to buy it. I'm always ready to read because I just love what he writes and have complete trust in what he writes, and he writes an awful lot. So
I stopped reading King at Gerald's Game because he wrote everything so vivid that I just couldn't read the book. I just had horror stories running in my head and just felt sick to my stomach. I was like, I can't read this. This is akin to watching a horror movie, and I don't like those.
Yeah, some of his descriptive stuff is...
I can't read his stuff either. I'm not into like horror or scary stories or anything like that.
Yeah, some of the things that he writes does put you on edge, or it makes you kind of wince because you're like, oh god, I can't believe he actually wrote that down. But it's part of his world that he's building, and he's brilliant.
I love Criminal Minds, but I can't read Stephen King. Go figure.
I mean, isn't it amazing that words on a page can make you feel that way, though? That he's able to make, fill you with that emotion. He's very skilled.
Impressive, yeah.
Highs and lows.
What would you say then has been your biggest high in your writing career so far, and the biggest learning curve you've experienced?
Well, the biggest high, I actually have two. Yay! The biggest high is when I published Embers, the one that just came out in March. Then, first of all, that hit number one in Amazon free books for about one day. So I'm an Amazon best-selling author. Yay! That was first high, but I think the better high was when I realized that during the free weekend, when I gave the book away for free, that about 1,000 people downloaded it. That was another one. It's just like, I have 1,000 readers. Yay!
That's really good.
That's really cool.
And I think that's one of the things as well that I'll ask you actually is like, I think new writers, myself included, you kind of build up an expectation of where you want your books to go and how many kind of readers are gonna approach it. And I think at the beginning it's going to be probably a little bit disheartening because I'd say it's going to be fairly low. Nobody knows who you are and stuff like that. But have you found gaining readership and stuff like that?
Well, gaining readership it's quite a lot about marketing, I found, which is one of the things that I'm still learning to do, and that's my steepest learning curve in the last 6 months. But ultimately, you can't compromise how you write, and there are some authors who write for commercial purposes, and I write still as if I was writing for me, not for anybody else. But what I like about the journey is, before, in 2012, when my first book came out, I knew for sure that it was just friends, fools, and family, which weren't very many, because not a lot of my family reads what I write. But I have friends who do love the stuff that I write. And by now, I love the fact that I know at least 10 people who love the stuff that I write, who can't express themselves how giddy they are that another book is coming out. And it's, yes, 1,000 downloads, but maybe half of the people will read the book eventually. And it's about the fact that there are people out there that are my readers, and they're slowly finding their way to me, either by word of mouth, by somebody's recommendation, by BookBub, by me participating in some giveaways where they can click on your book and read the synopsis, and if it appeals to them, then they might earmark and buy when it's on discount or whatever. But the confidence grows with the time that you write, is that there are readers. I do have a readership. You just have to find them.
Yeah, and I think that is, as you say, marketing is very difficult. It's very tough, and trying to get yourself out there is really hard. And it's, as you said, it's your biggest learning curve in the last 6 months, and I think it's been a lot of people's learning curves over the last year and a half to really approach things differently. And if that means putting yourself out there more, it's difficult.
But it helps when you have people who are following the same path. So I have been very lucky to find a couple of other fairy tale authors who are on the same journey, who publish very different books from mine, which I also love, and they love my books. And that they understand the value of cooperation, that, if they recommend my book to somebody and I will recommend theirs, then everybody wins. It's not we have to divide and conquer the world. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and that's and again another common theme through these episodes is it's about building people up, and it's about supporting people in your area, in your trade, and whatever it is you do, because you could see them as competition, but ultimately if you kind of help each other out, you're going to improve your reach to people. You're going to improve your scope for people to find you. So it's beneficial for everybody. There's no need to look at it in a negative way.
And also you can share knowledge, because most of the stuff that I found out during the last 6 months is other author friends egging me on, including me, of, let's form this group, let's chat over this specific topic, or have you heard about this? I'm doing this, do you want to participate? Or do you know something about the Goodreads list? So, whatever topic there is, they involve other people because they want to help others succeed. And I'm just super lucky that I found author friends who have the same mentality.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Really nice.
Yeah.
So what's coming next? What should we be looking out for from you?
The next one, the last one in the trilogy, again, you can read it as a standalone, is the Wizard of Oz retelling. And I can actually show you if I can now get my thingy to work.
Hannah's interest has just peaked there.
Really? You like Wizard of Oz?
Yeah. Oh, cool cover.
That's the book. And Ash Crooked Fates, there is a reason why it's called that. But yeah, it's an interesting mix of young adult and adult, because one storyline is a 17-year-old marching towards the Emerald City and Oz, and the adult storyline is Oz and his lover. So again, I've stumbled into the same thing that I did with the first book with Cinderella, where half of the book is from a 17-year-old's perspective, written as a diary, and the second part of it is from the perspective of the 37-year-old stepmother. So again, a mix of YA and adult. But I'm really excited because I'm still writing it. And it comes out the 21st of June.
Okay.
And again, with another author, just yesterday we were pinging messages, and she was like, I have a release date which is coming in May. It's like, I haven't finished, writing the end. I'm like, it's okay. I'm there with you. I haven't finished writing the ending, but I think I know where this is going now. So.
God, that is pressure.
Yeah.
That is definite pressure.
Share the spotlight.
If there's any other authors or writers or anybody really that you'd like to give a shout out to.
Well, two of my favorite authors are both independently published, as in they publish the books themselves. And they release a fun anthology in February. They were part of a set of 20 authors, and the anthology hit I think it was New York bestseller list, something like that. New Yorker bestseller list. So they're best-selling authors, and they're also fairy tales. They write fairy tales. One is Alice Ivigne, and I suggest that people read her Feathers of Snow, which just came out as well. Goose Girl retellings. She does very interesting bits where she showcases the downtrodden, as in, one of her princesses has a clubbed foot, another is deaf. There's something that she builds up really lovely heroines where a disability is actually an asset, and the way that she tells these stories is just amazing. Her world building, I envy that. I want to write that like that. And the other author is Astrid Vijay. And she published a very interesting book, which is called The Apprentice Storyteller, which hit #1 also on Amazon as a new release. And if you like Star Wars, and if you like Coelho, then marry those two up together and you get that book.
She had Astrid on. And,
yes,
a couple of weeks.
It has a very interesting Star Wars space opera theme, as in spaceships and all that, but it also has the olden way of telling stories, almost Scheherazade-like, and it's very, very different from anything I've read.
Okay. Yeah, no, she was very good actually explaining her books to us, and they do sound really interesting. And her story again is a really good story. We've experienced them. We've been very lucky. We've experienced some really good stories talking to all these people, including yourself, on these podcasts. And we just want more people to hear them.
Yeah, I've got a whole list of books to read.
Yeah,
from doing
I've gained
these
a lot
podcasts.
of books and stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and with these two, we're cooperating on a new book which comes out in July. And we're writing a set of short stories, also fairy tales retold, with a mer theme, so like ocean themed water creatures. And all of the proceeds from that will go to an Oceana charity, which is a Save the Oceans and Marine Biodiversity charity. So
that's really nice.
That's what lovely author friends do for you. They kind of like, do you want to write a story for this thing we're publishing? Like, yeah.
Yeah, what an opportunity, definitely.
Yeah.
Grab it with both hands.
Yeah. So where can people find you and your work?
They can find my books. The easiest one is probably on Amazon. So if you put in Sky Sommers, one of them will come up. And also, all of my books should be on BookBub as well.
Okay. Perfect. And do they have any social media?
If they want to find out a bit about backstories and a bit about cover releases and things like that, then I'm also on Instagram, although I'm not there every day. But that's where I share information about writing hints and tips, and also I flag quite a lot of books to my stories that are books that I enjoy that are on sale, for instance, and things like that.
That's great. And where would they find you? What's your handle?
It's Sommers _Sky.
Perfect. Okay, well, we'll probably leave it there. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great hearing your story. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the I-Endeavour podcast.
Join us next week for another episode. You can find us on YouTube or your favourite podcasting app, or on Instagram.
And if you're a creator or a small business that would like to take part in Series 2, email podcast@idyllicendeavour.com.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to make sure you see all future episodes.